Are you looking for a good story? I'm Greg Lefebvre, an artist and storyteller, and The Compulsive Storyteller is a podcast of short personal true stories that prove that truth can be stranger than fiction. I tell insider stories from my art career, personal life, and many tales from the wild streets of New York City in 5 to 20-minute long episodes. My stories are comic, tragic, or just plain weird. I'm always getting into a jam, and sometimes I get myself out again. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts. Hi, it's Greg, and as a bonus today, we're going to play something from another podcast we think you'll love. Enjoy this episode from So There I Was.
Okay, so 1380, instead of maintain 11,000.
Okay, down to 11,000. If you would, have him roll the trucks. It's on the engine number 1, captain side.
Okay, thank you. So the 1380, contact New York Center 135.45.
3545, good day.
Hello, you're listening to the podcast So There I Was, which is how all great aviation stories start. This is episode 35, a continuation of our interview with Bonnie, and my co-host, Repete. What a great show so far.
It has been fabulous. It was so fun to catch up with Bonnie after so many years. I've known her for a long time, obviously, as we talked about in the very beginning. We broke up the show at an obvious place, and now we're going to talk to her about some of her fleet experiences. Maybe some of her instructors, if they're listening, will understand why their bombs wouldn't hit the broadside of a mountain out in Southern California back in the day.
That is an awesome story because, it's kind of like karma. Karma
Right.
comes back, right?
Absolutely. And I got to say, that is one of the funniest things I've ever heard of in all my years in aviation. So,
Right.
and then it doesn't get funny. It gets real after that. It was emotional and hard to hear some of this. They almost lost that airplane. She was the captain on Southwest Airlines 1380 back in April of 2018. They lost an engine, and I thought that was it. She brought a single engine plane back that happened to explode and hit a window and hurt somebody. But how hard is that, right? Oh no.
I had no idea there was that much else that the public really doesn't know.
No. She and Darren are true master aviators and real heroes in every definition of the word. They did a nice job. They saved a lot of lives that day. So without further ado, sit back and enjoy episode 35 with gratitude to your service, Bonnie, and to your excellent airmanship and that of your first officer, Darren.
Oh, and to the tanker crew who did that. Thanks a lot. We really appreciated that. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. Well, there I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fond.
So I want to back up a little bit and ask about VAQ 34. You initially were told no guns, no bombs. You're just flying profiles and all that. And then, right? Am I correct from your book?
Well, not initially. My skipper had saved up and paid for 3 of us, one gentleman and Pam and I, to go do A7s. And you come back and it's a big wall of a board and your scores are up there for God and everybody to see.
Oh, you bet.
And Pam and I, it was the last A7 det ever. And so weapons detachment ever. Yeah. And so they were just set to have a really good time. And then suddenly they're saddled with the only 2 girls to ever go through. And let's just say the management was not happy about that, but they had to take us, but they didn't have to take us to dinner. So we ate out of the vending machines. All the guys took the cars and went to dinner. And so Pam and I had nothing to do but walk through our weapons pattern, call out, chair fly your weapons pattern. Yeah. So I don't think that we were better bombers or strafers. It's just that we had a lot more time on our hands to practice. And we wound up being number 1 and 2 on the board in day bombing, night bombing. And when my strafing scores were higher than the instructors, they took our bullets and bombs away. And
That's an ego check for those guys.
As it should be. Geez, you can't
right.
outscore us. What's the matter with you? Have you no
awesome.
sense of decency, woman?
I know. Pam and I were excited that we were keeping up, let alone doing well. But they took the bombs and the bullets away. I called home because I'd kind of had enough of the nonsense and said, Skipper, did you pay for those bombs, or are we here on their good wishes? And she goes, oh, no, I paid for the gas. I paid for the bombs. I paid for the bullets. I said, well, we just had all of them pulled. And she said, oh, I'm sure this is classic Rosemary Mariner. She said, I'm sure there's a misunderstanding, Tammy Jo. I said, no, I'm telling you, we have been pulled and we're allowed to fly, just Pam and I, the profiles. We have nothing to drop. We have nothing to shoot. And we're not flying with the guys. And they've quit progressing us through the program. We're not doing the low level laydown. We're doing 30-degree dive, 45-degree dive. She said, I'm sure there's a misunderstanding. You know what? I'll check with the skipper because I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. And the next day, the officer in charge, of the detachment, Lieutenant Commander, he was pissed. And he had been called and said, you will put bombs back on those jets. And he never gave us our bullets back. We did the strafing runs dry. And we never got to fly with the guys again. They'd put one instructor with us, and Pam and I would do 30-degree dive, 45-degree dive. But he was so mad, and he comes into the ready room, with this big bravado in front of everyone, who called home wanking about not having bombs and bullets, thinking that I would be so ashamed. And I said, well, I did, sir. I'm just like you. I'm wearing a flight suit. I'm on a weapons debt. I want something to bomb with. I want something to strafe with. And at the end of that conversation, even though we weren't allowed to join in, he did understand that I don't have any objective more than he did. The funny thing is, the Master Chief, who wasn't pro women, at all, but he kind of saw the underhanded stuff that was going on, and he knew, I'm sure, that the guys that were checking our bombs, because they always shake them once you're in your jet, you've done your pre-flight and everything, but the enlisted go around before you leave and shake each little Mark 76 to make sure it's on there good and not going to be falling off on top of somebody. I can't see my own because of the Delta wing on the A7. I couldn't see my own wing and bombs, but I could see our instructors' bombs and wings. And then Pam, who was on the other side, Dandy, her last name Lyons, so her call sign was Dandy Lyons. I could see her, but I saw them doing something to his bomb. So I turned around to look, and they had these big wrenches, and they were just cranking the fins of his bombs. Oh my gosh. I just started laughing knowing.
So the fins are what make your bombs fly straight when they come off the airplane.
Yes. So they were sabotaging the bombs. Oh, that's awesome.
My goodness. So I told Pam over frequency that we're on, I told her, go Barbie, which was our pre-planned quad 3.
That's great.
If we had, what do we do here? Or what's happening?
A discrete frequency to talk on.
Yeah. And so she went quad 3, and I said, check out his bombs. And by that time they were on the other side cranking his fins. We were laughing so hard. And when we left, all the enlisted lined up and did the wave. And only times they did that was when they cranked his bombs. So him not knowing that, and I mean, he couldn't hit the side of a mountain.
Of course not. It
was called the curse of the girls, because whoever flew with us had the curse of the girls.
That is great. That is great.
I never told them until the book came out. And if they read it now they know they weren't that bad of bombers. They had cranked fins.
Well, I'm sure awesome. It did. I'm sure it was a total ego destroying opportunity for them. That's awesome. That is great.
That is great. Well deserved.
Navy humor. It never ceases to amuse.
Right? I mean, you can't go without in this business without busting someone's chops at every opportunity. But when they get pedantic like that to turn around and have someone deal some flight line justice is a beautiful thing to hear about. So,
that's great.
Hey, one other quick one that was also in your book. You're bombing dead in A-Force. What did they do to you? And who else noticed it? This was cool.
That was funny. In recollection, I mean, it just makes me realize that even though kind of had a rough OPSO XOCO in A4s, it was known as the Nazi squadron, and they lived up to their reputation, and that was among the men. So
Yeah.
having the top three guys there really anti-women didn't help. But whenever we went on detachment, none of those three were with us. And the day that I was briefing, because it's a 4-plane formation, the students are always, in the front and supposed to be in charge of their jet. And we're out at El Centro, and it's my turn to brief the 4, and being on time, on target's really on the shoulder of the lead. So I brief, and I leave us plenty of time to get dressed up and started up, and everybody's kind of hanging back in the hangar. And I check out my book, and I notice everybody's kind of lolling, and I'm thinking, I'm heading out on time. This whole idea of don't leave your wingmen, they've got to start their engines to be a part of this. And nobody is even walking out to their jet. And I'm getting a little puffy inside my helmet there, thinking, what in the world? And I go to the back of the A4, climb up on the wing, go check, make sure my master arm is safety, to go back down. And I never noticed, but I go to grab the bomb to give it a shake, and it is dripping in pink paint. And everybody's just howling. They're so funny. I mean, the enlisted, the instructors, the other students, they were just waiting for me. And when I didn't even notice
That's
it,
great.
walking up, they were thinking, oh my gosh, how long is it going to take for this prank to play out? I get up there, I check, but I was so in my thought process about they better get up there and get ready.
That's awesome.
That's
And
funny.
then we're at the
So you were dropping pink bombs, freshly painted pink bombs. That's
Yeah, but before we got airborne, it was when the Blue Angels were there, and everything stops when they start to taxi. So we were at the hold short, and we got held for the Blue Angels to taxi by and take off. And the first Blue Angel stops in front of mine, and he couldn't tell that I was a girl with my helmet on. I wasn't talking at that time, or anyway, I think he probably didn't know. But he looks at those pink. He stops the whole Blue Angel parade and says, "Nice bombs," and then he moves on. And so, yeah, the humiliation didn't end until they got off my jet.
Right. Didn't have to come back with hung ordnance at least. But.
Oh my goodness, that would have been. It never ended.
The best part of that story, in my mind, is that the grace with which you took it. So and I think that's what I got to say. I think that was a lot of your success, the grace with which you took the setbacks, intentional and malicious, and the grace with which you took the pranks as well. I mean, that's important. Being able to roll with the punches, I guess.
True. And AOCS, which I don't think they had any real proverb for us there. But no, I take that back. There were a couple of proverbs for us there in AOCS, which was keep a good sense of humor and don't take yourself too seriously, and attention to detail. So, like I said, there were certainly more good guys than bad. Like the pink bombs, that was totally for fun. I mean, It really made me laugh, because the OPSO in that squadron, which made the whole squadron, like I say, they had the Nazi squadron was their nickname. And he was just a hateful guy. And he'd come in and said, "Bonnell, you're going to props. Your torso harness doesn't fit." And being the OPSO and you're a student, everybody just looked at me like, oh my gosh, she just got kicked out of jets. But the para-riggers, again, the enlisted, had heard him talking about this and had said something to me about, if your torso harness doesn't fit, you just go to China Lake and get one that fits. The guys do. The guys who are shorter or super tall and skinny. I mean, we've sent pilots out there before. And I'm kind of thinking, I never mentioned my torso harness didn't fit. I'm not sure why they're telling me this. And then a few days later, the OPSO comes in and makes that announcement to the ready room. So God had me prepared, and the para-riggers had me prepared. And I just said, "Oh, I'll just go to China Lake, get one that fits her. No problem." So
that was the end of that.
Let the air out of his sails.
Yeah, he did leave. the ready room. I think it was foiled. Yeah,
So a successful career, and then getting to fly Hornets. That was terrible. I know you didn't like that airplane much.
Nobody does. It's just nobody likes that plane.
that was a dream come true. I never thought.
I still haven't even gotten a ride in one. It looks like it might be a little fun to fly.
Yeah, just a little fun, really fast.
Any funny stuff from Hornets? Don't mean to put you on the spot.
I'm trying to think.
Yeah, we'll come back to it if something pops into mind. Because what I would also like to do is then, you talked about, you're getting pretty senior, and then it's time to fish or cut bait, I guess is the best way to put it. And you decided, you know what, it is time for me to get out. You did we had another gent on Nowhere to Go But Up, I think was the episode. And he did some firefighting with the Hollywood Guard.
Oh, okay.
And so you did some firefighting flying.
Yes. It was as I was getting ready to step out of the Navy, one of my F-18 simulator instructors asked me if I'd be interested in flying the O2 over forest fires. It was called the air attack position. I would fly with a forest ranger in my right seat. And we kind of did reconnaissance through the canyons and over the fire for winds and direction and heat index, and so that the heavies that laid down the mud could know what they were facing and how low to go or how high and directions. And then he coordinated the ground troops, and I also coordinated the air stuff and kept the news folks at bay so that they didn't collide with our guys. But that was it. It was fun flying. It was so opposite the Navy. There was no competition, as far as I was the only O2 and I had my mission. Everybody else had their mission. I've never flown with such laid back people in my entire life. I felt like we'd gone back to the days of flat hatting, not that they flat hatted, but I'm just saying, flying low and
well, they did, but it was legal. It was a legal flat.
Totally legal.
It was the wild west right there.
Yeah.
It was for us. It was pretty fun, and then went on to get my type rating and apply to Southwest Airlines, and landed there, about 28 or 29 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Nice. Yeah. So you're at Southwest Airlines. That wasn't an easy road for you either. It looked like that was a little bumpy at the start.
Wow. Yeah. I think looking back on it, of course, when you're going through the storm, you can't really get perspective sometimes.
Right.
There was kind of a mini culture war going on at the time. CRM had just come on the scene as being something that companies were saying, we don't need sky gods. We need two-pilot cockpit in these commercial airliners for good reason. Both people are qualified. There's a reason there's two of you up there. There's even a book, I think, named Sky Gods. And most of the captains I flew with came through when they were treated as a first officer, like the captain was God, and whatever the captain said or acted like or did was going to be, that's how we set the tone, and don't speak up. That certainly didn't set well with some of the captains. There was some great captains. So again, it's always the minority that make the squeak in the wheel, not the majority. Also, tailhook had happened in the Navy, which set a lot of people's teeth on edge. I'll let whoever's listening, if they're not familiar, look that up. I never went to tailhook. It wasn't my scene. I wasn't interested in that slice of camaraderie. And so I certainly didn't have any part in it, but there was just people who were frustrated because when behavior was exposed that shouldn't be going on, a lot of people were pulled into that shadow that maybe didn't deserve to be, but when
it got some people, I'll say it got a lot of people that probably needed to have their reins checked. But it damaged a lot of people who just happened to be there and had nothing to do with anything.
Right.
And it was disappointing to see senior leadership just threw their people under the bus to try and save their own backsides.
Exactly. So that had gone on. And then Kara Holt Green, who I knew she was in a sister squadron and had gone through as a student when I was an instructor.
I went through VT-27 with her.
Okay. I remember in A4s, which I wasn't in A4s, but she wound up going through the Nazi squadron that I had gone through. And I remember one of the male students there crossing paths, I don't know, at lunch or something. And he said, yeah, Kara got a below average for smiling too much. And I thought, that sounds like my old A4 squadron.
There you go.
But anyway, she had died behind the boat.
Yeah.
And it was
terrible.
at the changeover time of women going into combat in aviation. And there were just some real strong attitudes about that. And I tried to always just, when people wanted to get into this debate about it, I would just say, you know what, these are decisions that are made in Congress. I would just say vote for the congressman that makes the decisions you like. That's the best any of us can do. I don't have anything to tell you.
You're way above my pay grade here.
Right.
Yeah, it's above my pay grade, and moving on. So all of this stuff is kind of swirling around whenever I get to Southwest, and some great guys. I can't tell you, just people I will keep in touch with the rest of my life. Captains that I flew with. Sumner Weil was one of my first captains. He was a nut and just made flying so much fun. And Jim Rice, one of my favorite pilots that I've flown with in my life. And Fig Newton. I mean, there's just such a list of great guys, but unfortunately, I ran into some not great guys. And so there were also a couple in middle management that had a real complex about women. At the time, I didn't know that, so I just felt like, what am I doing to garner such hate and discontent? So with that stage set, there was somebody who had not done well initially in the Navy and then had gotten a fleet seat, but had also gotten kind of an invitation to leave early due to tailhook. Again, something I had nothing to do with. I never went, but he definitely felt like he could make some problems for me. So he did what he could. And to this day, I have never met him. That's what's so funny. I mean, this is all done by somebody who never even met the guy to this day. But I wound up getting fired by Southwest, not because of anything that I had done, but because of gossip from this person to two middle managers that were happy to hear gossip. And the Navy stepped up in a really drastic and dynamic way to say, this is not true. I mean, here's the records. It's not true. My husband's skipper flew in, as well as Captain Mariner flew in to testify on my behalf. And to end on a funny note, whenever Tom Vaughn, my husband's skipper, at the time that this incident was in question, whenever he took off, he lit his afterburner and set off every car alarm in the Southwest parking lot.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So I just thought, not only the sound of freedom, but lots of honking horns as he leaves.
That's outstanding.
Beautiful. So that was at the hearing where you got your job back.
Yeah. Where I got my job back.
A lot of people stepped up to come and say, hey, you're doing this wrong. Yeah.
Totally did. And here's a point that I think is probably one of the really good takeaways of our whole podcast, really. When I got my job back, of course, I was a little bruised and battered for this. And
I wonder why.
And
it's only your whole life, right?
That wasn't stressful or
not at all. And honestly, it had gotten to where there was like maybe less than 5 people who would even look me in the eye. The demolition of my reputation was being approached so well. But whenever they offered my job back, I told Captain Mariner, I go, man, I don't know that I want to go back and work for this company. Yeah. And she said, you know what, Tammy Jo, you need to realize that first of all, if you don't go back, you and Dean will have a family, you'll have a happy life. If you go back, but if you do that, of course, you'll be unhappy because you worked so hard to this point, and stepping away from it will be a sacrifice. You won't be happy, but you immediately, but you'll still have a happy life. If you go back, there will still be ugly behavior towards you. You will not be happy no matter what choice you make. What you need to do is go 5, maybe 10 years down the road, turn around and look at what decision would make you happy 10 years from now, you know? And I remember after just on my knees in prayer over this and grueling over it and trying to figure it out, that made sense to me. And I thought, that is exactly right. She said, don't worry about the lies that swirl around you or your reputation, because truth will outlive a lie. It'll take time, but truth outlives a lie. And so I took my job back, and it was, I mean, there were years that I had ugly behavior. Now, I will say, when I got back to work, I flew with the Czech Airman. I'd flown with him before. His name is Jim Rice. What a prince among men, and incredible aviator. And he knew me, and he knew what a bucket of ugly bolts that had all been. And he said, Tammy Jo, I want you to just enjoy this week. We're going to have fun. And off we went.
That's awesome.
And we had so much fun flying airplanes like pilots like to do. So, yeah. And then I think just months after that, we adopted our firstborn. And then a year and so after that, we had our second. And to be honest, being a mom definitely outranked being a pilot. It's best job on earth.
Awesome.
Hardest job, but best job on earth.
What a stressful time from start to finish. How long were you out? So to speak?
I was out. I was, no ID for 6 months. And truthfully, if Captain Mariner hadn't stepped up and said, I want you to come meet a couple of ladies from Dakowitz, they're for Department of Defense, they're not for civilian pilots. But she said, I just think you're going to need some legal representation. And I had always pushed her back on that. I said, no, there's a union, I'm sure I need to just let it process out. But Susan Barnes and Susan Kudla had dinner with me, just anticipating, just listening to my situation and pointing me to the right attorney, which I had to laugh. We had no money. We're just out of the Navy. I was out of the Navy.
Took a pay cut to do that.
Took a pay cut. Dean was still in the Navy, but we just, I think we bought a home in Texas by then. And anyway, bottom line is they had dinner with me. And at the end of it, they said, we'll take your case pro bono, but you need to decide, do you want a pile of money or do you want to work? And I said, I just want to work. I just want to be left alone to fly. I just want to work. I just want to fly. And they said, okay, so we make 2 different directions depending on that. And so we went towards working, and so glad. I've always been glad that they accomplished that. And Southwest is full of great people. And I think it's really hard to know every middle manager's motives. It just happened to be I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Years later, after Flight 1380, finding out from the SWAPA, or our Southwest Union attorney, that I was the last in a long string of females that were getting hatcheted by these 2 individuals and some men. I mean, they just kind of had that.
They're on a little power trip. If you weren't,
they told me. Yeah. Yes, they told me up front, these 2, that HR doesn't always make the right decision in hiring, and they're there to correct it. So the attorney said, yes, that's true. That's what they did. And so, mine was the end of that that rain
Well,
there.
thank goodness
So
they got put in check then. But oh my goodness, what a horrible thing for
it
you to
was,
have to go through to make it.
it was not, yeah, I would say it would be one of those
No.
low points in life,
Yeah.
but there's always a way up.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a good segue, and
Yeah.
I got to make this. I have to say this because I just feel like it's so everything that you went through, and I don't mean just this these guys that tried to hatchet you from Southwest Land, everything that you went through from starting with AOCS up to that day. I think it was in April of 2018, Flight 1380. Think about that.
Yes.
That is a once in a career. Well, hopefully
I hope
never
not.
in a career,
No,
but
yeah.
you know, that's a
Right.
one-time career, non-normal emergency that you had, and it's almost like
Right.
it was destiny
Someone less
that
prepared.
you were there that
Yeah.
day on that flight. You know, based on all your experience and all your you know, especially your
Right.
ability to make on, and I don't want to go into great detail because you may want to talk about it, but just the fact that you had the wherewithal to say, you know what, we're not going to put the flaps at 15 because I don't think
Yeah.
this thing's going to fly. You know,
Right.
you had that experience. So can we
Yeah,
just
tell
hit
us
some
about
high
it.
points on that?
Right.
That was a you know, and I didn't realize until I actually I'm going to confess until I read your book because I had listened to other you know, I listened to some stuff on the internet, and of course I saw the
Right.
press release from way back when, but had really no idea how significant of a control problem you had.
Yeah. In fact,
with flying
and then
airplanes.
let me interject
Right.
this and then hand it off to you, Tammy Jo.
Sure.
If any of the listeners haven't, I urge you to go onto YouTube and look for Southwest Airlines 1380 and ATC and listen to the conversation back and forth between the controllers and Tammy Jo and her co-pilot Darren. And I say this in all honestness. Yeah. Anyway,
Are you
honesty.
creating words right now?
Again,
I know.
yeah. My co-host here giving me crap about creating words.
I love it.
I
his
think
work.
I can honestly say that I was under more stress the last time I ordered a cheeseburger at the Wendy's drive-through than you were telling approach that, yeah, we're on fire. We're going to need a longer final. You were so calm, and it burns through all of that. And you listen to it and then understand what extremis you were in. Oh my goodness. So yeah, please tell us about how you got there and how it came to be Nerves of Steel.
Well, I would say great crew. Darren and I had flown the day before together. And then we met the ladies, Shanique Mallory, Rachel Fernheimer, and Catherine Sandoval for the first time that morning. So second leg of the day, we were leaving LaGuardia for Dallas. And at about 32.6, we had an explosion, heard and felt it. And then it was like being hit by a truck, T-boned, because we just skidded sideways, pitched over in a dive, and did a snap roll to the left. And
Yeah, that's terrifying.
later on it was pretty, the power involved in that, and finding out a little bit more after the NTSB report is in. And I just spent some time at Gulfstream. They had a safety stand down, and fan blade off was their point. And so getting to see a little bit more of it from the engineer perspective, and looking at the, I think it was the E-11 Bombardier out in Afghanistan that had the same thing. Darren and I thought we'd been hit by another aircraft because the jolt was so violent. There was no precursors, and both of us just grabbed the controls and slowly brought it back into control. And there was, in the Boeing 737-700, you know, your engine instruments are pretty good size and in a stack.
Right.
Engine number one, engine number two, and engine number one was obviously flashing. So we just assumed number one was dead. We just had a moment of time that we could see that. And then the shuddering.
Southwest 1380, if you're trying to get me, all I hear is static.
Southwest 1380 has an engine fire descending.
Southwest 1380, you're descending right now?
Yes, sir. We're single engine descending. Have a fire number 1.
Alright, Southwest 1380, okay, where would you like to go to? Which airport?
Give us a vector for your closest. Philadelphia.
We're just flying 250.
Okay, heading 250. We're looking at Philly. That's
Southwest 1380, roger.
We thought the hit would be it, but then this shuddering just kind of crescendoed and got worse, so that we couldn't see our checklist, we couldn't see the engine instruments, we couldn't get our hands on the mask switch for a while. You know, it was a pretty rough dance for a little while. There was smoke pulled into the cockpit that was intensified a little bit by the cloud of condensation that was formed, this roar that just grew to a certain decimal, and then it couldn't get any louder, and it just smothered every sound. We couldn't hear our own voices, let alone each other's, and we sit, you know, a foot and a half apart. And then we had this ice pick pain in our ears that we both compared on the ground later, and I guess that was just the collapsing of our station tubes when the rapid depressurization happened, and
Right.
So all of that combined, it was a little startling, and
Wow.
it's
That's like
funny
saying the sun is a little bright, you know. Okay.
Well, again, adrenaline here is pretty interesting when you don't, you know, you're kind of out of control of things, and adrenaline kicks in, and it won't give you an epiphany beyond what you already know. There's no alchemy in it, but it does give you a recall that's pretty impressive. And it just, you know, thinking about different things that had happened, really different stories. And if we have time, you can let me know and I'll tell you what those are at the end. But it helped make some snap decisions on the way down. I tapped Darren on the sleeve just so that we went back to just one person controlling the aircraft, because we both recovered it. It's just a natural reaction. Yeah. But remembering Air France and two people doing opposite controls, and I made sure that he knew that he had it because it was his leg. And I wanted to make sure we stayed as a team, that he didn't feel like, okay, no, now it's just the captain show, that it was still a team effort. So I made sure he had it. We got our oxygen masks on and we could talk, and decided where we were going to go, talk to ATC. Then I made a PA, just thinking, it startled us. I mean, even the fire extinguisher came unclipped. That's how hard the hit was.
Wow.
And
Wow.
Then I made a quick PA to the back just to let everybody know that we were still in control of the aircraft, and told them we're not going down, we're going into Philly. We were pretty nose down for a while. I think we were about, 5,000 feet per minute.
That's pretty
average.
rate of descent. Yeah. That's probably three times the normal rate of descent. So it probably had everybody's attention, along with all the other stuff that was happening back there.
Right. I mean, if you think about the atmosphere back there, so the fan blade that came off, when it sheared, it didn't go out or back. It went forward because of the speed and created a sonic boom inside the engine, which is what peeled back the cowling, kind of like a banana peel. And the small pieces that came out of that boom are what did the most damage. The big pieces, the ATC said they could track, part of the rim to the ground where they found it. But the small pieces are what tore chunks out of the leading edge of the wing and hit a number of windows. One piece was that big buckle. There's only two underneath the 737 engine that keeps the cowling on. And that heavy buckle is what damaged one of the windows to the point that it gave way.
Southwest 1380. I understand your emergency. Let me know when you want to go in.
Yeah, we have a part of the aircraft missing, so we're going to need to slow down a bit.
Southwest 1380. Speed is your discretion. Maintain at any altitude above 3,000 feet, and you let me know when you want to turn base.
All right. Down to 3,000. 210 on the speed.
So while this tearing of materials, and it severed hydraulic lines and fuel lines on that side, but that tearing never steadied up to be the same shuddering. You could hear and feel tearing of materials the whole way down. So I know people, including Darren and I, we never had this feeling of, okay, we've sustained all the damage and now this is what we have to fly. It was constantly a different syncopation to the shudder and the noise and the sound. So people in the back, they're hearing this as well. And then the rapid depressurization, if you've seen a balloon pop, you've seen a rapid depressurization. And so it's air that equalizes pressure, and it does so rapidly and with extreme force. And we were about 7,000 feet inside, 70 degrees. And it exchanged with 32.6, negative 25 degrees, like that. Also, just having one window open in a car at 60 miles an hour, it's unpleasant. And part of it is because of the reverberation in your ears. And that 60 mile an hour wind hitting 60 mile an hour wind trying to get out the same port. And so we had around 500 miles an hour or so trying to hit that same port. So it was not pleasant at all in the back. And so that's kind of what we were dealing with on our way down. And we were about 10,000 pounds overweight for landing. And of course, we practiced single engine every year. And the 737 is amazing, especially after this flight. I would have to say incredible that it can sustain such damage and fly. It's a wing. But we had enough damage on the outside, on the left side, that when we started bringing power up on the right side to level off going over Philadelphia Pryor, we realized we can't use very much power over there. We have so much drag pulling us left that at a certain point, the power, which still isn't letting us level off and maintain airspeed, it pushes us that way. So we had to pull a little power off, and that wasn't enough with the drag that we had to level off. So around there is where we found out about the injury in the back and what was going on. And you can hear on the ATC, or maybe it's ATC or cockpit voice recorder transcript, that flaps 15 is what we normally do single engines at. 30 or 40 is a normal landing. But since I could see the wing chewed up, I really didn't know how much was chewed up, where I couldn't see it. And I didn't want to have asymmetrical flaps when I landed. And then realizing we couldn't level off and keep any kind of airspeed, that we had to trade altitude for airspeed. Airspeed being life, because that's what gives you rudder authority and able to keep a balanced flight. Aircraft don't fly well sideways. They cause even more drag. So we had to fly at whatever airspeed we could keep our nose straight in. And that meant trading altitude, since we didn't have thrust available that would do it. And so flaps 5 decision, Darren was incredible all the way down, I have to say. He took over. He called out a lot of things that were going wrong. I worked with what was working right. We kept a good communication all the way down. He brought up ideas, and sometimes we used his and threw away mine. Sometimes we used mine and threw away his, and I just loved the fact that we could both throw out ideas. And if they worked, we grabbed them. If they didn't, they fell to the floor and we moved on. There was no pride in this, and
sure.
So I could see the chewed up wing. I was the one flying down lower. He was taking care of communications, trying to make sure our people were okay in the back. And so when he offered flaps 15, because that's what we do with single engine.
It's a standard single engine flap setting.
That's it. I had to tell him, no, I don't think that'll work for us today. And we, flew 180, which was flaps 5 maneuvering. We had been making a lot of left turns into the damaged engine and had to be really careful. It wanted to roll over. We'd get bank angle with just the slightest pressure to turn. And our last turn was 90 degrees to the right. And we kept on all the power that we could, which still wouldn't keep us. I felt like a pretty much a Boeing glider at that point, but we were still on profile, I felt like, to make it. And we couldn't turn right. The tower controller or the approach.
Left 270.
Yeah, we didn't have the power to. We didn't have the altitude. We didn't have the power to do a left 270. And he said, the runway is behind you, which is a nice way of saying you're overshooting. And then he goes silent.
Southwest 1458, give me a best forward speed, please, and tower's 18.5.
Best forward, 18.5, 14.
Bearing 714, direct peace out.
Direct peace out, Fairwing 714.
Southwest 1380, like to start turning inbound.
Southwest 1380, just start turning southbound there. There's a Southwest 737 on a 4-mile final. Will be turning southbound. Start looking for the airport. It's off to your right and slightly behind you there. And altitude is your discretion. Use caution for the downtown area. Advise you maintain at above 2,200 for the MVA.
Okay, could you have the medical meet us there on the runway as well? We've got injured passengers.
Injured passengers, okay. And is your airplane physically on fire?
No, it's not on fire, but part of it's missing. They said there was a hole and someone went out.
We'll work it out there. So the airport's just off to your right. Report it in sight, please.
In sight. South 1380, airport's in sight.
Southwest 1380, you're cleared. Visual approach, 27 left. 27 left and towers on 18.5.
We're going on 27 left. Switching tower. Good day.
And in the cockpit, whenever Darren and I went back to listen to the cockpit voice recorder at the NTSB headquarters, it was silent in our cockpit. And then there's just 2 words from me, and it's Heavenly Father in a question. And Darren said, I knew you were praying. I said, all the way down. I just remember, I thought it was a private conversation. And I remember thinking, Heavenly Father, I know we did not get 30,000 feet down, still in control of this thing, and can't turn the last 90 degrees. And I mean, prayer for me often just takes that metal cage off my mind, and I could think more creatively, more clearly. And Al Haynes' story came to mind where he used asymmetrical thrust to get turned to line up with the runway. And I thought, that's not even funny. That's my problem. It's not the answer, but it really was. It was the answer. I pulled power off, got it turned around. It put us below profile. I had Darren pull up the VMC on my HUD. So that gave me a 3-degree, dotted 3-degree glide path and a velocity vector that I could line up with the landing zone. We did, but we immediately had to creep back and put the velocity vector towards the end of the runway to keep up our airspeed. When it got to the end of the runway, then we had to give up airspeed. And we were silent on the way down. There was horns blaring. There was altitude below glide slope, altitude below, whatever was going off. But because 180 is maneuvering speed for a nice, slick, clean airplane at flaps 5, we were flaps 5 with all kinds of things, flapping and drag. And we were, like I said, overweight for landing, which means we should have had more than 180 knots probably. So we really didn't feel like our landing was assured until we touched down. And we came in, I'm sure, flat because we tried to keep it on the pipper on the runway until we just had to start pulling the nose up and come in. And we landed between 167, 171 knots. It's a successful landing.
Yeah. Yes.
I know that we didn't do everything perfect by a long shot. I'm sure others could have done better, but I felt like we kept our priorities straight.
Easy to Monday morning quarterback everybody's decisions, and yours were just spot on from where I'm sitting.
And Fig, I'm going to say, since you fly that airplane and teach in that airplane, I could be wrong, but I'm guessing you're going to use a lesson or two from this book.
I am actually every chance I get, because we as airline pilots have gotten a bad reputation lately as not being very proficient at flying and letting automation take over too much. And I think this is a prime example of hand flying, understanding your energy state and how your aircraft's handling made all the difference between this being a success and us having this conversation and that being just another horrible accident.
Right. So. I agree with you. I do think hand flying, because obviously everything was knocked off and we never even tried to put it back on, because when you hand fly, you get to feel your energy package better than if your automation is on, and what that trade-off is. Yeah. I look at the Bombardier accident with the fan blade off. Their autopilot stayed on and they shut down the wrong engine and never got it back on, crashed and killed both of them. In ours, the automation went off. Also, I will say our instrumentation, I felt like was a lot bigger and easier to determine which engine had died. There's a couple of things like the Air France I mentioned, and then just realizing, having that sobering pinpoint in your mind that I am going to be accountable for every moment forward of this day. And this total non-aviation, although it has some good aviation stories in it, but Horse Soldiers is the one that has some pretty cool aviation stories in it about Afghanistan. But Lone Survivor, Mark Luttrell, in the very beginning of his book, he talks about their SEAL team made a decision at the beginning of their mission that was based on fear of what the faceless oversight groups would say. And it was the wrong decision.
Right.
And it led to the death of 36 people and almost his own. And I just remember that sobering thought right after this explosion, and we got it in hand. And I realized, okay, my decisions are going to be made according to what I know is right. I'm not going to worry about what other people are going to say. I will answer for for my own decisions here. So the priority was always to land. And so everything we did, if it was peripheral to that, then that's what we did.
Yeah. Well, I want to mention also, your book, and we're limited time here, so you don't have time to go into it. You do an amazing job in your book talking about that you didn't do this alone, that your crew, it took your entire crew. Right. So your credit to them is well written out and explained in the book, and as it should be. And you talk about their service-oriented leadership that they provided both in the cabin and out. But another thing that you kind of glossed over, but you made an amazing point of that I want to bring to the fore, is that you made the quick call to the back and said, we're not going down, we're going to Philadelphia. And your line about that in the book was, hope doesn't change your circumstance, but it changes the people. And what you did, you gave them hope in the back, and you gave yourselves hope by going, okay, here's where we're going. We've got a destination and we're going to get there. So the hope that you implanted in your own minds and implanted it in the people in the back changed their outlook on the situation in which they found themselves. And that was a very profound statement.
I thought so too.
I've had some good leaders, and leaders don't leave mysteries for their people. And so I had such great examples to prompt me into what I hope were good decisions. And if I hadn't made the PA, I know Darren would have soon, but at that time he was flying.
So we were just plates and juggling chainsaws, was he?
Right. We were exactly. So that was, and I have to give some bravo to our flight attendants. I've already named their names, but we also, because of their bravery and getting up, going against protocol, against procedures, to stay buckled up, they got up and went down an aisle. It changed the day for different people that day. Yeah. And we had passengers, Tim McGinty, Andrew Needham, Peggy Phillips, just starts the list of people that got up that day to help people.
Yeah. So God bless them all. That is awesome.
Hey, Bonnie, you mentioned so the adrenaline factor and some clarity that you could maybe talk about at the end. Is this a good time for that?
Sure.
Well, I'm sitting on the edge of my seat here. I want to hear what you have to say.
And then the CVR review. I want to hear about that.
Oh, okay. Well,
do it in order. What that you think is important.
All right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, please do.
I've told you a little bit about the the true stories that just kind of flash up. And adrenaline, again, to clear away the underbrush of illusion there, adrenaline will not make you into superheroes, but whatever you've taken time to store, it really comes forefront. And Darren and I both, I think, realize whatever you make a habit daily, that becomes your instinct. And we don't have any choice in our instincts, but we do have a choice in what we groom our habits, which then turn into our instincts. So we saw that day, whether it was out of control flight instincts, whether it was the instinct to take care of other people, because we've been on both sides where we haven't been taken care of, or we have been taken care of. And so, making your decisions in your everyday, how you're going to make those decisions, it really comes to bear. Also, that retrieval that I was telling you about, just thinking about things that are pertinent that I did not try to bring forward to my mind. But with adrenaline pumping, it just seems like you have a leisurely time of thought, even though things are happening really fast. And I remember the Swiss Air. It really is. Yeah. It happened in the T2 when we were going straight down. And so I recognized it as from adrenaline. But the Swiss Air flight, that not long before that they had a fire on board. Right. And they chose to orbit overhead an airfield and do checklists until they ran out of fuel and crashed and killed everyone. And I just remember I had that flash when we were trying to get our checklist, because it's challenge, response, and it just was getting hard to get that done. And I remember thinking, at the end of the day, if they need an epitaph for me, it will not be, she did all her checklists and then crashed and killed everybody. I thought, you know what? I will
but
answer.
Her checklists were perfect.
Yeah, I will answer for the lack of a checklist any day to getting on the ground. Yeah. And not, like I said, a better man than I, Gunga Din, might have gotten them all done and landed as well. But
well,
for Darren and I, we kept our.
Yeah. Bonnie, listen, and for all the listeners, checklists are there so you don't miss steps. Checklists are there so that if you have a non-normal, you have a path. However, they're only as good as the situation, and not all situations are the same. As a matter of fact, most of the time we train in the simulator, it's a canned situation. It's a non-normal, one at a time. Very rare that we double up and do multiple non-normals at once. This situation was completely off the reservation. It was not in any script. And you didn't have just one non-normal. You had multiple. You had airframe damage. And so you had to pick, and we're completely my internet just went a little wonky, and it's on my end. I'm sorry.
You were bad for a bit, but yeah. No, you were saying you had a dead and dying engine, controllability problems, rapid decompression. And by the way, you got the words from the cabin that there's some bad injuries back here.
And then there's a medical problem. You got injured people. So just to set the record straight, or just to give our listeners an idea, you had some serious decisions to make and keep the airplane flying and try to get it on the ground. So the fact that you maybe didn't run all the checklists or chose which checklist to run partially, and what I think, so that's all part of being an aviator and keeping your aircraft flying. It has nothing to do whether or not, like you said, you could have run every single checklist perfectly and then come up 2 miles short in the river because you didn't fly the airplane
because you took the extra time to run checklists.
Yeah.
Right. It was something that took my full attention. And
I can't. Gee, you sound like I don't know.
So, and the NTSB, I will say, and I've gotten to talk to Robert Zumwalt-Sense, and they actually came out with no criticism about that. So I felt like we all realize, there's times, like you said, the checklists are there for a path. And certainly having used them previously, frequently, we had a path that we already knew in our minds. And so we had the systems knowledge, we were hand flying, and we had the checklist that on the final approach, Darren just pointed at the flap inhibit switch and I nodded. So there were just different things that you work together as a team, and keeping our priorities was, I loved that about Darren, working with Darren. He knew, I mean, I never had to pull him forward to, this is what we're doing now. And he never, I hope, had to pull me forward. You know, we just both kept on pace on what we're facing right now. And
that's
I think that's important. Hand flying
that's a
and
testament
keeping your priorities.
To your training, your professionalism, SOP compliance. I mean, all that, what you said, daily habits. You know,
right.
It all came into play. And the fact that you two work so well together is just a testament to your training and your professionalism. Well done.
Yeah, well,
indeed.
Thank you.
Well done.
Great crew that day.
As I tried to point out in the beginning, Tammy Jo is a professional and a gentle lady. And that brings me to the story that I requested, the CVR. You and Darren go in and you listen to the CVR.
Yes.
Wait, what's CVR stand for?
I'm sorry, cockpit voice recorder. So
right.
no one, it's never published. I mean, they'll put the transcript out of what was said,
right.
but you'll never hear and that's a good law because you don't want pilots who are in extremis and about to meet their end to have that their family have to listen to their voices as they perish, that sort of thing. So
yeah, the NTSB called us about 2 months later and said it's available for you and Darren to listen to. I mean, the CEO, the chief pilot, no one can go in. Only you, only the cockpit people can go in. You're not allowed to have a piece of paper or a pencil. You listen to it once, it's very official, and it's done. Wow. And as we're headed in there, Darren said, you know, I am not looking forward to this, really. I mean, I feel like I should, but, and he kind of teased me. He goes, you know, if you could have acted just a little more upset that day, I think we would have gotten better handling. You know, we kept getting asked, are you an emergency? And then we have to say yes, and how much fuel and souls on board, and da-da. And so he said, you know, I kind of think that's your fault. I said, okay, fine, Darren. You know, we kind of laughed about it, went in, and he was feeling bad about, man, I don't know why I couldn't get through the checklists. And after listening to what was all going on, because in the cockpit voice recorder, you can hear ATC as well as us. So it's a very busy sing-song going on all the way down. So he understood that better, but they were giving us instructions at the beginning, and they said, all right, we're having you here to help us make sure that the transcript is correct. Now, we have done our best in transcribing. Where there is a proper name, we redact that and put an @ symbol. And where there is foul language, then we put a £. And I kind of thought for a minute, I thought, wow, foul language. And the guy that was giving the brief stopped, and he looked up and he goes, okay, this we've all checked. And this is our first flight without foul language. And Darren said, well, I cussed the day before and she hit me.
That's awesome.
And the NTSB guy looks at me like, and I went, not hard. It's
just a throat punch, no big deal.
Just a punch in the No, I did not clothesline him. I just punched his arm.
That's a show title there. She hit me. Tammy Jo, thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for your laying the path ahead for all the women who are now flying tactical jets. That was not the case when you came through, and I know you don't view yourself as a pathfinder and a glass ceiling breaker and all that.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
But you have done good work, and so many people, their lives are easier because of the hardships you endured with the grace that you did. So thank you for that. To our listeners, I want to ask you to go to SoleraWas.us/rumble and please subscribe. So once we get to 100 subscribers, we don't have to pay to bring you these live streams on Rumble anymore. Thank you also to our sponsor, RobinsBirdBrainDesigns.com. If you'd like your squadron logo and your call sign on a slate coaster, laser etched on a slate coaster, that'd be a good place to go. RobinsBirdBrainDesigns.com. We do have a glossary page on SoThereIWas.us. So if you heard a term like HUD or PIPR or something like that, I'll get those up there and we'll explain what those are if we didn't explain it during the show. We also have a links page so that you can view the Rumble videos but you have to be subscribed to SoThereIWas.us to get to that links page so you can get to the Rumble videos. Thank you to Dave Hamilton over at the Mac Geek Gab for his support in helping us get this up and underway. And thank you to Dos Gringos for the music. So in the meantime, until we meet again, stay safe and check 6.
With all that stuff supposed to save your life, but we knew there was no way. Cause when you're going down the North Atlantic, man, it's over. Now about 4 hours into the flight, well, I got a little nervous cause it was still night. I'm on the wing of the tanker, man.
Southwest 1380, runway 27 left, clear to land, wind 280 at 19, gust 25.
27 left to land, Southwest 1380.
Southwest 1380, right turn when you're able. If you want to stop wherever you need to is fine.
Thank you. We're going to stop right here by the fire truck. Thanks, guys, for the help.
Are you ready to tell your own story on The Compulsive Storyteller? We're launching a new segment of guest storytelling, and we want to hear your stories. Email a voice recording to hello@thecompulsivestoryteller.com. I'll play selected stories on upcoming episodes. Try to be as clear as possible in your recording, and we reserve the right to lightly edit them for length and clarity. Leave your name or contact information in your voicemail or email, and let us know if you'd like the story to be anonymous. I can't wait to hear from you. The Compulsive Storyteller is now co-produced by Greg Lefebvre and Fadia Montserrat, who's also arranged the music and created the special effects. Emily Ramon does design, research, editing, and marketing. Peter Kokoma has made our theme music and for many seasons co-produced the show with me. If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Compulsive Storyteller, and we'd love to hear from you. This podcast is independently produced, so we really appreciate all your help and support. Share the show with your friends, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and please leave a review. You can also check out our website, thecompulsivestoryteller.com, for more information. Thanks for listening, and if you didn't like this one, the next one will be another story.